Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from today. We're super excited to have you. Thanks so much for taking the time in your busy schedule to tune in live. We appreciate you. My name is Jasmine Goodman, and I'm the head of corporate communications at Contentstack. I will be your host for this webinar, but it's not about me, it's about our fantastic guests. We'll get to that in a second. Contentstack, quick sales pitch, is the leading provider of composable digital experience platform solutions. Now that's a mouthful. If you want to just remember one thing, it's DXP. And whilst I'd love to tell you all about that, that is not why we're here today. Before we start, really quick housekeeping, and then I'm off your back and legal is off my back. So it's a win-win situation. You will find that we have muted all lines. Not because we don't want you to talk, but we're quite a crowd here, so don't take it personally. That said, we're super interested in what you're thinking. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please do ask them via the question box in your control panel. That is at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on which browser you're using. I might bring that up during the presentation. And we will have time for questions at the end, so don't hold back, but also know that we do have some time reserved for that in the very end. If there's anything not working out on your end, technically, do get in touch with us via the chat. We do have folks here that can help with that, and we'll make sure that you are, in full control of what you're seeing on the screen. We are recording this webinar and we'll share the recording within the next couple of days, so stay tuned for that. And please feel free to share it with colleagues, friends, family, cats, dogs, parrots, whoever might be interested. And that is it. So let's get started. Today we're going to talk about the triumphs and trials of composable commerce. Now we've given ourselves a big overarching theme, and we're going to get into what composable commerce actually is, how it can support brands in their growth and omnichannel ambitions, and much more. But most importantly, let's introduce our guests. You know me already. I also sit on the boards of Mock Alliance, which helps organizations move to composable. So I really live and breathe the topic, and I'm super excited to have Mindy and Ross here with me today. Mindy, please introduce yourself, and then Ross.
Hi, I'm Mindy Montgomery, Associate Director of Consumer Platform Product Management at Asics Digital.
Wonderful, Ross.
Hey, thanks, Jasmine. Thanks for having us. I'm Ross Humphreys and manage partnerships for Grid Dynamics in EMEA.
Wonderful. So let's talk about composable commerce. Mindy, you've got an introduction for us, and I love it. That I will say up front. Tell us how you see composable commerce as a natural evolution of our technological landscape.
Yeah, so really, thinking about e-commerce in general and where it really started out was through mail order. Back when I was a kid, there were all these deals in the backs of comic books or in cereal boxes where you could send in money or cereal box tops, and then at some point in time later get the product you ordered. And really, e-commerce just lives in a world where that's accelerated quite a bit. Instead of waiting weeks or months, you now wait hours in some cases, especially if you're using services from our friends up in Seattle. So really, it's been this evolution of where you would order something and buy something, but you wouldn't get it until later, which is very different than a retail experience. But as we've moved forward through the e-commerce journey, which was really, fairly basic, which e-commerce one was fill out a form on a website that was an analog to a mail-in form. And then getting to where it was more sophisticated, where you would take, you could take payments online, which was a big step forward. And so instead of, having this form that you could, fill out and then submit via likely an email protocol, you really got to the point to where you could do full commerce online and everything that comes with that. So, you went from this form-based approach to, now there are these solutions that deliver an e-commerce experience, but they're very all-in-one. to start with, you think about the big monolithic platforms of the past, like, oh, we have this TV VCR combo, which is great. But overall, if you're looking for a more enhanced experience, that single thing and that monolithic platform doesn't deliver it. And so we started to see innovation in the market, where instead of, you having this one system that did everything, well, now there's specialty solutions. Like, for instance, personalization is a big one, especially now with AI joining the fray, and really being approachable from a non-academic perspective. So, instead of having this platform that did everything, now you're adding all these pieces and parts. Well, a lot of times the first pieces and parts you added were done through a direct connection. And so you ended up with this very labyrinthine, every system is connected to every other system, instead of a more hub and spoke and orchestrated model like we have today. So, really, when you're starting to think about composable, and where we started to think about it is like, okay, now that we've built this platform and slapped all these things on it, we haven't been efficient in how we did that. So what are we going to do to make it more efficient to add new things, but also efficient in a way that we can replace solutions or add new solutions that do very specialized things? So, it's always this, oh, this thing that we're adding is going to make things better. Well, it might make that one thing better, but if you do that enough times, then you end up with this patchwork that now we're breaking apart. And I think a lot of other brands are doing this too, especially when I've talked with Contentstack references and talking with the team at Grid Dynamics. It's comforting, but also a little troubling that we're not alone in this, and that everyone's kind of taken this same approach, which makes, I think, it very, very good for knowledge sharing in forums like the Mock Alliance, where we can learn from each other and think about, oh, okay, how did you, when you took this approach to bringing in a new A/B testing solution, let's just say, how did you go about doing it? Did you use something or select something that had a pre-built connector via Contentstack or, your e-com engine like Salesforce? Or is it something that you truly want to make it composable and you want to write all those connections yourself? So then when you do switch solutions, you're in full control of that and you haven't leveraged what was done by someone else. So I think that's where, when we think about the future of e-commerce and really not just e-commerce, but digital experiences, I think that's where we're really trying to go, is to find how composable we need to be effective and enable our brand to do its business.
Absolutely. And I mean, looking at the picture here, I think we're all guilty as charged on a duct tape approach at some point in our careers and our lives. And at the very least, we've witnessed it, and we kind of sort of went, yeah, well, I mean, that's, duct tape fixes a lot of things. And it's not horrible. It does work for a while. But to your point, if we want to really have a conversation about, let's stop using all the duct tape all over and ending up in a situation where nobody's comfortable, but everybody's afraid to touch anything because you might just break the most important piece of your business unwillingly because you don't know. Tell us a bit about how your e-commerce platform looks like, what it looks like, and what you've arrived at in terms of less duct tape and more integrated approach.
Yeah, so it really started with, we had a bunch of solutions that we had essentially either hardwired via integrations with Salesforce or connected in a one-off manner, right? So we had SEO being done, but it was being done, really looking at it in a sense that wasn't effective for us. And we're actually investing quite a bit in SEO in this year and the coming years. So people weren't able to find products. Our conversion rate was very low. Site performance was being affected. And so we took a step back and said, okay, how do we need to fix this? And how do we do it in a way that doesn't take the whole system down? And so really that started with deciding that we were going to take a mock-based architecture approach and started breaking out what APIs we needed to build in order to get those systems talking to each other through an orchestration layer. The other piece I think that we don't talk about, or that's not necessarily stated in the mock acronym, is being stateless. So a lot of our systems, meaning that the system doesn't know about anything else that it doesn't need to know, and it doesn't store that information in a persistent manner. So in a lot of cases, we had data that was being stored in edge systems that didn't belong there. And so that was one of the things that we really had to think about, was like, how are we going to make these edge systems less intelligent, because they were overly intelligent and it was causing us a lot of problems. So for instance, we had a lot of order data, and order data changes over time. An order itself has a state and a status. And so we had order data that was being stored in the incorrect state in a system that didn't need to know about that. And that was causing a lot of issues for us. So there's really, in addition to the mock acronym, I would say, S being stateless is something key that people really need to think about. And that's something where, this is a discussion we're having today is, do we need a true OMS, or can we use our ERP in an OMS fashion that is acceptable to us and gets us what we want? So I think that there's another piece to really think about when you're talking about breaking apart the system. And that was something we struggled with for a long time. But really, I think the big first decision for us was, are we going to be API led? And the answer was yes. And that's where it all started.
Yeah, and I love that. And that's just for everyone who's listening who may be not as familiar with the acronyms that we're throwing around. MOC stands for microservices based, API first, cloud native, and headless. And Mindy just beautifully added an S for stateless. I love that. Love that idea. So let's take a look at what, how we define composable commerce, because I think that's a great sort of next step to look at. We define it as an architectural strategy. And I think that's important, because architecting, a good architect doesn't just add on to existing things, like Mindy beautifully explained. Many, many, many times, less is more. So it's as much about taking away what no longer serves you as it is about adding things that you are not yet capable of doing. So always think about it in both dimensions. And composable commerce to us really is a selection of best of breed, headless, API first, cloud native technology to build or disassemble pieces from a stack that really make the stack uniquely fit your needs in your specific commerce business. Because every business is different. Yes, we're all the same in some sense, but our needs and our requirements are completely different at every stage of the business, in every region, and really anywhere you look. So, what's the point? And I think you're already getting a sense of where we're going, but I'd love to bring Ross in and get his perspective on why do we need this? Why do we need to be flexible? Why do we want to be able to make choices?
Great, thanks, Jasmine, and really good hearing from Mindy there and their experience and what their challenges were. I think, if we look over the last couple of years, in terms of what the unexpected, whether it's macroeconomic climate or dare I mention, lockdown and all of those things, that they, as well as in line with the customer expectations and experience, I think that they have foisted upon brands and retailers in particular the need to make sure that they have the flexibility to go where the customer wants or where the customer is, but also to be able to sort of manage their estate in a way that gives them that flexibility and works with the imperatives that they have. Right, you talk about every customer, every brand knows what their pain points and what their needs are from as an enterprise. So I think that's an important point to make. I guess omni-channel nature, I guess that addresses that in terms of the customer. Mindy's sort of highlighted those issues as well. If we take that one step further and talk about enterprise everywhere, I think it's like that distributed notion of enterprises beyond the DXP. If you like, enterprises now have the expectation that they should have that flexibility and that sort of best of breed across all of their enterprises, right? So whether it's order management, Mindy mentioned before, whether it's product inventory management, CRM, ERP, we don't want to go down too far down too many different routes, but that expectation, that experience, that cloud native scalability, elasticity is all there for the client across those traditionally siloed systems. Now unlocks a lot of capabilities for brands. I think data is one area that we've seen, and Mindy mentioned that earlier, in particular data across multiple platforms, that we now live in sort of the data era, I guess, and I think that's an important factor as well, and one of the additional benefits that we're seeing from the composable approach, and where that's extended across multiple platforms.
But I love the point that Mindy made about, we had a bunch of data that was useless, if not harmful, because it was the wrong data in the wrong place. These days we're so overly, almost maniacally focused on having as much data as we possibly can. And I think Mindy just beautifully pointed out, no, that's not, more is not always better. Actually, it can cause you quite a few problems if you have the wrong data in the wrong places. At least, how did you identify that, Mindy? Just because it became a problem?
Yeah, and it's something that we're actually still dealing with in certain ways, and that is for a long time, and even still, data throughput is always an issue, and when you have an online system, there's a sense of urgency and immediacy, because if it takes a long time for your site to load, people are going to leave it. Or if it takes a long time to process an order, and the customer resubmits it, that causes other issues. And so we're still finding that we have data in places it shouldn't be, and that gets factored into when we scope and prioritize features, is kind of doing some cleanup after the fact. But we're having issues with orders being fulfilled multiple times because the order data wasn't up to date, or there being customer service issues because orders were in a state where the customer couldn't figure out what was going on with it, because the system that was presenting them with the information didn't have the correct information in it. So it's not like to your point, it's not the volume of data, it's actual quality of the data. And I think that's something that everyone has struggled with. You can't have perfect data, it's impossible. So that should not be your goal. Your goal should be the right data in the right location so that the right action can be taken on it.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the beautiful benefits that we look at here. You do want the right data in the right amounts, in the right quality in real time. And we had a fantastic session at MAC 2 where a huge retailer, Irish and base, actually said, out of stock should be forbidden, because out of stock really only says that you don't have any fucking clue about what your logistics chain works like. If anything, it should be saying is being restocked and will be here in 4 weeks, or whatever your time window is. Which is actually a beautiful segue into, we've talked a little bit about the theory of composable commerce, and the theory, as we all know, is pretty in pictures. But at some point, the rubber has to meet the road. And that's what you guys did at Asics, Mindy. I would love to hear from you what it actually looks like in real life. Can you tell us about the Asics vision and where you are on your composable commerce journey?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. So Asics, in product management, especially in the consumer platforms group that I'm in, we have the luxury of a very value-driven brand and a very clear mission and vision. So our founding philosophy, Asics, stands for Anima Sana Incorpore Sano, which means a sound mind and a sound body. And if you've noticed our branding over the past few years, we're really leaning into that. And that's something that speaks to me personally, having been a long time Asics customer before I joined. But then we also have this mission that the corporation has set forth, which is to create quality lifestyles through intelligent sports technology. And for Asics Digital, that, for us in technology, in high tech, is very different than in shoe technology, right? They're talking about foams and materials and recyclability and sustainability and all of that, which is super great. But we need to then, how do we as Asics Digital build a platform that allows for that, those experiences to be created? And so we're really trying to build 1 second. Sorry, there's someone working in the yard next door, so I'm going to change venues very quickly.
Go ahead. See, this is live, people. This is what happens when you are live broadcasting, not recording. We cannot edit it out. So Ross and I will just hold down the fort until Mindy has changed locations. And so Ross, you've done a fantastic job at helping Mindy/Asics on their composable commerce journey. Tell us a bit about what your experience was like. When you met them, what was your first impression?
Well, yeah, Mindy just talked about it there. I wouldn't say a luxury, but they're certainly at an advantageous position in the sense that they are a large enterprise with a very clear vision and a very clear mission. Now, that didn't happen by accident. That's part of their DNA as an organization. You know, we talked about being Asics customers. We all know, you know, their commitment to quality, and you know, whether it's they're synonymous with, you know, higher, faster, better, all of that kind of stuff. And so I think that's clear, and that was clear with our engagement with them right from the outset, is they knew what they want, and we were quite motivated by it. They were quite motivated, clear vision, clear mission, and you know, they had made a lot of that clear to us prior to our engagement. So I think we can address this. Mindy is back on, but we can talk a little bit about that. I think one of the key elements for us was that they had made the technology selection up front. So that made things not easier for us, but we knew we were dealing with a digitally mature organization who knew what they want and knew where they wanted to get to. And it's our job to help them get there. Yeah. And then for them to run their existing business or their existing platforms and get there in a smooth manner. And
Mindy,
you know, some of the
other
areas, yeah, we have Mindy back, so maybe I'll hand the floor back over to her, because I think she's in a better position to talk about that than I am. But
yeah, and that was something that you know, I joined the composable journey partway through. Some of the key decisions had already been made about, you know, the fact that we were going to take this mock-based architecture composable approach. And then myself and a few other people joined the Asics digital team to actually go do that. So we were partway through, the decision had been made, and there were some technology decisions that had been made. For instance, we had already brought in Algolia. But the big push was when we selected Contentstack to be not only our enterprise content management solution, but really be a key component of our DXP, which is what we're building. So this is a view of kind of where we're at today. As you'll notice, there are a lot more blocks on this diagram than on the previous diagram. The darker purple blocks are what we are working on through the end of this year. So we've brought on a new loyalty management platform that does more than just points for e-com purchases. We're really building a loyalty program that rewards people throughout their experience with Asics and some of our other brands that you can see up there at the top. The e-commerce or the enterprise content management solution, cart and checkout, is something that we've refactored to get to a headless solution there. That's been a multi-year project because being a global brand, our checkout and cart and payment processes are all very, very different across the different regions. So we have, I think, probably 20 different payment methods we support in various combinations around the world. We brought in an SMS marketing platform this year that we had over 400% growth or adoption over what we expected, which was great, except for when the bill came due. And then as part of our part of what we're doing with the Contentstack implementation project is we're building out a content delivery pipeline that includes a design system, which is really going to be a key piece of our e-commerce everywhere plans for 2024 and 2025. And then there are some lighter purple blocks that are things that we're either introducing in 2024 or we're renewing this solution for that. So one of the things that needs to be made aware of, if people aren't aware of it already, is for every block on here, there is a contract. And so when we were talking about the TV VCR combo, it was great because it was one thing. Well, the monolith is also great because there's one contract. You don't renew it very often, but you know, the more solutions you add, the more often you have to do that. So keep that in mind when you're planning. Know that that's going to be some additional work that you hadn't maybe seen in the past. But it's easier because you're doing it more often. So those muscles are have their memory with them as you do it, and you'll get better at it too.
And the scope of work is usually smaller, right? It's not one giant thing where you have red lines over red lines over red lines, and then you go back to square one because somebody had an issue with everything in the first place. So it actually is easier in a sense if you're trying to not not extend a small piece versus renewing one giant thing where you cannot make decisions about, yeah, but I just need X, Y, and Z. No, you're going to get the whole alphabet for the cost of the alphabet, whether you like it or not. So pros and cons, like always in life. We touched on this briefly while you were gone, Mindy, but if you wanted to walk us through what the key decisions were that set you guys up for success as far, as you've come already, knowing that there's still a long way to go, but tell us a bit more about that.
I think the keys that and we might have a cat sitting here in a minute. The keys are really what would the two we really wanted to focus on were number 3 and number 4 there. So we really need to empower our content creators because we're going to have more of them than we have in the past. Usually it's been people on the ecom op teams doing all the content management and creation with, one of the key deciding factors around Contentstack was the ability to empower content creators across the enterprise. So instead of, there being a bottleneck with 2 or 3 people managing all the content creation, it's really the people who are doing the job of creating that content are actually empowered to do that job within the tool itself. And so that's really key. So it's going to make us a lot more nimble and allow more of our content to be distributed through more channels, which, drives more engagement, which ultimately should drive more conversion, which is what we're here for. And then the composable capabilities as well, to really have those experiences context aware and delivered in a way that people are expecting for where they're when they're engaging with the brand, as opposed to just, here's a stock image of a shoe, you should buy it. So those are 2 key things that we're focusing on that I think are going to be, we're going to see those come to life in 2024.
That makes perfect sense. And it also reduces a lot of the things that are prone for human error, right? If you can have systems automatically, correctly communicate with each other, and nobody has to go from spreadsheet to whatever front interface you're using, that is definitely a plus. Now, this might be strange to say as a technology vendor, but one thing I've learned is that the technology is usually not the biggest problem when you're on your composable transformation. So actually what people say many times is, well, Jasmine, the tech was the easy part. I thought that was going to be hard, but that was fairly easy compared to what followed, which I had not taken into account. So embracing composable as a strategy is often underestimated, not from the technology factor or the digital maturity, but from a mindset point of view. What has that been like for Asics?
So it's interesting timing that you bring that up, because we've been having some, as we're rolling out Contentstack, we're rolling out a lot of other things with it. So, we say, oh, we have the vision, we have the technology, we have the engagement, we're done, right? And it's absolutely not done. And so what's been really interesting is, as we've started rolling out these content types and then being live on the site and adding more to it, we're getting more complex in the content types that we're enabling and then presenting to the user. And one of the things that we've kind of adopted when we're thinking about why we're making certain decisions or why things are presented in a certain way is we're asking ourselves the question, are we doing this because it's the way we had to do it with our old solution? or are we doing this for a real business reason? And oftentimes the answer was we were working around the tool because of the limit of our old tools, because of the limitations we had. So it is correct that, you know, the technology can be the easy part, so long as it's good technology. And in the past, that was not the case. And so we were doing things to manage around that. And now we don't have to. And it's been a definite switch in how we approach not only managing content, but building the content types itself. And so it's been a little bit enlightening and freeing. So, you know, we talk about mindset change. So when you go composable, you really have to stop thinking about your platform as a feature machine, and really about how do we deliver a product and experience to our customers, both on the business side and as well as on the consumer side. And so that takes quite a switch. You know, if you're used to saying, oh, I'm gonna enable this new feature because, you know, the partner on the brand side said so, it's like, well, you really need to think about, is that something that we really need to do? Or is it more of, let's start thinking about what problem that solves, or what job does that allow that customer to be able to do? And so that's been a big transformation from a business perspective, as well as from a capability and platform management perspective. And one thing I'll touch on there, the last point that we've talked about quite a bit, or we've talked around quite a bit in this conversation, and that is the sunk cost fallacy. Jasmine, you had said, you know, adding things, but also getting rid of them. And that's something that I think people have a really hard time doing, because, you know, you've made this investment, you've done all this work, but if it's not really serving the purpose it was intended to, or it's actually getting in the way, then you do need to get rid of it, because it's causing your business harm. I think we talked about that from a technology perspective, but also a data perspective. And that's where, you know, that mindset change is really key to driving future success.
And I would add that it's also a mindset shift in a personal sense, because we just had, funny enough, a very similar conversation with Sky UK, one of the biggest media enterprises in the world. And what they said is, well, sometimes our problem is that if we don't rotate the developers through the different projects, they become so attached to the code that they've written that they will not let go of it. It doesn't matter whether it makes sense or not, but they basically feel like, you know, you're murdering their child if you're asking them to, you know, to even hand it over and explain to somebody else what they've built. So I think that's so often overlooked. There's a business component, there's a tech component, but there's also a personal growth mindset perspective on it that businesses really need to embrace if they want to be successful. Let's quickly check in on the technology portion of that mindset. Is that something that you guys experience at Asics as well?
A little bit. We have fairly specialized developer resources in-house. We're working on, because and part of that's due to how the platform came to its recent past and somewhat current state. And we're trying to get away from that so we can utilize not in this, I don't mean to make this sound negative, but we have a need for more full stack developer capabilities. Obviously, everybody specializes a little bit, but you know, we had kind of backed ourselves into a corner where we're like, we have to have Salesforce Commerce Cloud expertise in-house, and we still need that to a certain degree. But as we go on this composable journey, we're going to be able to have a little bit more resource flexibility, because we will need to have developers who have a little bit more full stack experience. And so where the change, it's not only just a change in what technology do we use, but how do we build out that technology so we're delivering those solutions. And part of that is, you know, just organizational maturity, and part of that is just the realities of the business. You know, we were having trouble finding a Salesforce architect. I mean, I think we had that position open for 9 months before we were finally able to find somebody. And so when you have a more flexible platform, you can be more flexible in how you resource the delivery of that platform and the capabilities it provides. So it's kind of all coupled with, you know, product, technology, business, and then, you know, what experience you're providing. And as that whole thing becomes more flexible, your way of thinking about it and the delivery of that will become more flexible as well.
That makes perfect sense. Let's finish it off with what you call the engagement mindset.
Yeah, so Asics was late to the e-com game. We had our first e-commerce, true direct-to-consumer e-commerce platform came online in 2013, which is like, oh my gosh, that's 10 years ago. But I looked at my Amazon history and my first order was like in 2001. So it was a little late to the game. And so, you know, for a long time, it was just like, well, asics.com is where you get shoes or you get them at the running store. But now with, you know, the explosion of social media and engagement with customers, there is, you know, Asics, the brand, is the front door, and it doesn't matter where you're encountering Asics, we need to meet the customer there so we can engage with them and help them build those lifelong healthy lifestyles. And so that's really where we're starting to see a lot more engagement. We've signed a number of partnerships with not only our sponsored athletes, but Stephon Diggs, who's an NFL player, who's very, very much into the healthy mind, healthy body, mental health advocacy. We signed a partnership with him. We have other athletes that we sponsor, obviously, and there's just natural touch points that aren't necessarily on the shoe PDP page, but are opportunities to engage with consumers. And we need to build a technology platform that enables those experiences for engagement.
And I love that approach because it really is about the customer in the best possible sense. And you're really putting your best foot forward and meeting them where they are and helping them achieve something that they may not even know will become their goal, because it's not just buying a pair of running shoes. It's, and, you know, and what next? What comes after that? How can you help them train? How can you help them be successful? How can you make them sign up for a race? How can you really help them grow and be the best version of themselves? And that's a very, very different mindset than, hey, how can we sell as many things, shoes, shorts, shirts, you name it, as humanly possible. And Ross, I would love to get your take on it, because as an expert for or in assisting businesses with driving this kind of transformation, do you have any advice that would help companies that are looking at, you know, starting their journey? What's the best way to tackle some of those challenges that we've just discussed?
Absolutely. Yeah. And thanks for that, Jasmine. Yeah, so I think Mindy has covered quite a number of these already. I think setting a vision of what they want is very important as a digitally mature organization. You know, Mindy talked about the milestones they have, the type of customers they have. I think that in some senses with a brand like Asics, it may be clearer than with other brands, but we're here to help other organizations that maybe don't have those milestones that are quite as clear. I think that's very important, but everyone will know what their pain points are, and they'll know that that's a good starting place, and then to set a vision of where they want to be medium to long term. The approach is really important as well. I mean, in a composable world, you know, there are certain terminology like strangler pattern or big bang or all those types of things, you know, by de-risking by leveraging componentized approach to it. So whether you're starting, Mindy mentioned earlier, elements of search, whether it's SEO, search or content management is a great place for to begin with. We think that, you know, Mindy already mentioned some of the benefits in terms of empowering the team, and sort of relatively obvious ROI that can demonstrate in terms of engagement. Experts, I think delivery is really important. You know, talking about different styles of delivery and embracing different change, but being able to deliver and having those milestones, deadlines, I think that doesn't go away just because it's a composable world. Yes, you can iterate. Yes, there are POCs you can do, and that ties into some of the vendor management stuff we were talking about earlier from contract point of view. But I think being able to work with partners who have the expertise, who have delivered in the old world and can augment that with understanding of the new composable world. Empowering your people, your team. So Mindy talked about that as well. So enhancing your teams with experts. And there are people who may be married to the code, but that has to change. And we see that as well. That's I think we see, particularly with custom builds in large enterprises, that people are can be reluctant to move away from that, but it's just not sustainable with the customer expectations and the external factors that enterprises are having to adjust to. So I think empowering the people and empowering your teams and ensuring that that they're facing into the vision and the mission. Analytics, we talked about that. I think being that's a different thing. I think in the monolithic world, there was a lot of that sort of system monitoring, analytics, reporting, bug fixing, whatever it is. There's an element of that that's removed, I guess, and that's a bit of a cautionary note with composable. I think working with a team that knows how to set those up and can work with you to identify that going forward as you compose your new technology stack, or decompose it or recompose it. And I think leveraging scale opportunities. So FinOps, again, we talked about like multiple vendor contract management. I think that's an important thing, but being cloud savvy, working with your financial operators to say, right, how do we manage these multiple contracts? Can we leverage our commitment to our friends in Seattle or wherever they may be, right? We all know who they are, but there's a lot of flexibility for enterprises there, and it's sort of well documented, I think, both through the Mac Alliance and through other, whether it's through your service partner or your cloud partner, that there are benefits of consolidating things like that. One example of that would be Contentstack's recent listing on AWS, for example. But I know a lot of enterprises have a multi-cloud strategy, and you have to be flexible with that. So I mean, that's a bit of a cereal box list, but I think in the conversations that we've had here, I think a lot of that leads into that. I don't know if I'm sure there are other things that we've missed. I like Mindy's stateless notion as well. I'm gonna have to try and work that into a new acronym, but someone will come up with something intelligent. But yeah, that would be it. Yep.
Good luck with that. But honestly, I think, I mean, if we wanted to boil it down into, the one thing that we want people to take away, I think it's probably start small, right? Identify something that is an immediate pain point and something that you absolutely want to do better, and just start there, because there is a notion out there that you have to do it all at once, or you have to do all the things and everything needs to go. And that is definitely not the case. You can start very small, build a POV or POC, more frankly, around something that is a pain today, and then create the results that will get you the buy-in, that will get you that next step approval. Because one thing that we haven't touched on, but we have a question here, and I will open up for questions in a sec. One of the questions that I have here is, how do you get buy-in from leadership? And I think that's a very fair question, because we're all in companies where we're not the CEO or the founder, and it's not a 5-people enterprise, 5-people company. So there is that element of socializing, getting buy-in. So Mindy, from your point of view, what's the best way to go about that?
I'm glad you started off with an easy question, Jasmine. It's really interesting. It's somewhat related to a conversation we're having right now, which is how composable do we need to be? And the kind of the question that predates that is, do we even need to be composable? And in some cases, the answer is no. You know, I could probably posit a handful of situations where no is the correct answer, but really what it boils down to, and the key levers you have are your overall total cost of ownership of your platform, and that includes maintaining it as is. You know, as you look at, you know, I mentioned we have a lot of specialty skill sets in-house. And part of it, you know, from a business perspective, and this is the cold hard reality, is if you're paying too much to maintain your platform because of how you've built the platform, then that's a lever you have to talk about going composable. Because, you know, there's a lot of old technologies out there that people make a lot of money maintaining because of the fact that the company using the technology hasn't moved off of it yet. And so there's definitely the total cost of ownership and the dollars and cents of it. But then there's also the customer expectation. You know, if you don't have a way to deliver content to where customers are, they're not going to be your customers. And composable is what's going to allow that. Now, how far down that road you go, your mileage is going to vary on that depending on what type of experience you're trying to deliver. But it's, you know, it's going to happen where going to myurl.com is not the way most people engage with your brand. And in order to serve those channels, you have to have a strategy that's omni-channel. And omni-channel, in my mind, is best served through getting somewhere on the continuum of composable.
Absolutely agree, because you don't just want to keep up with what everybody else is doing. I think that's another component to add right there. If it was just about that, there are multiple ways of doing that. But the second you want to be ahead of the competition and you're locked into a certain way of doing things, that's not going to go down well. And that's sort of, you know, you eyes wide open, you're sliding into that, and you'll find yourself in a situation that is even worse than probably today. Mm-hmm. Before we open up the floor, let me share this with the viewers right here. So what we have done to be helpful, because that's what we're actually trying to do, we've compiled composable best practices. If you follow the QR code on the screen, that will take you to our Go Composable resource site, which is a collection of information about how you can succeed in your composable transformation journey. It's grouped by persona. So whether you're in the business realm of things or the more technical side of things, we do have bits and pieces for all of you. So go check it out. But that said, we do have a few questions that have come in, but if somebody's listening and has just now a question running through their head, feel free to put it in a chat box or the question box on the bottom. But here's one for you, Ross. What's the difference between composable commerce and traditional e-commerce? That's a good one.
I think composable I think we covered it quite well here today. I mean, maybe not in a black and white sense, but the composable journey. But I think it's about a modular approach, right? It's about a best of breed. We hear that often, or best of need is probably the reality of where people should be, to borrow a couple of cliches. But I think composable is about modular. It's about removing the front end from the back end. You're decoupling the monolithic system, and you're selecting a best of breed, whether it's search, content management, PIM, order management, basket, checkout, right? They can all be broken up into packaged business capabilities or microservices, whatever it is. And it's about composing those in a way that works to your requirements in the new world, leveraging cloud native technology. As a non-technical member of staff, I think probably given an okay summary on that. But yeah, that's my understanding. Traditional e-commerce, I mean, as you say, you know, the monolith is how we describe it. It's a shop in a box, maybe a very big shop with a significant number of features, as many features as you like, but it comes with the enterprise grade e-commerce come with a lot of complexity, a lot of domain specific engineering training and requirements and investment. And it takes a long time to crank up, right? And crank down, as we know, right? To de-invest or to decompose. So that would be my, my espresso summary of composable and traditional ecom.
That's amazing. And Mindy was nodding her head a few times, same here. So that was, and I like the espresso version. I'll use that expression going forward. One more question, and then we'll wrap it up because we're a bit over time, but I feel like one more is fine. Mindy, it's also very practical, like that. How do you go about selecting your vendors? Because we talked about there's no longer just one, there's many. How do you go about that?
So we have a couple of different processes we follow. I've heard a rumor of we're going to standardize, but there are typically two ways we go about selecting vendors. One is through a formal procurement process. So we'll issue oftentimes an RFI and then a formal RFP and go through a very formalized process around vendor interviews, scripted demos with a wide variety of stakeholders represented in the demo. So making sure that like ecom ops, the technology team, product, and customer stakeholders are present. We don't make selection. Like I can't just go choose who I want for a given solution. Typically, the other way we've gone about choosing selectors is we identify top 3, do a shorter interview process, and then do a proof of concept for a very small portion of it. And if that looks to serve our needs, we'll choose a vendor that way. Now, my gut is telling me, and from what I've heard, I think we're going to opt more for the formalized process moving forward. For all cases of proven technology on our stack and proven capability, I think we'll still explore proofs of concept for new technologies such as generative AI and stuff like that. If we decide to directly add that to our platform through our own solution, as opposed to a solution provided by one of our solution providers today. And as far as more guidance or sample RFP requirements matrices, there's one of those available, I think, there's a QR code that Contentstack has for that. So we can probably provide that as well. I don't know exactly where that's at, but that's something that we shared at ContentCon.
Absolutely.
So I think that's available for people as well. But I would say, don't feel like you have to do it alone. Lean on your partners, especially on your business users, to help you define the requirements, to make sure that you're providing a solution that they're going to enjoy using and that they'll have some ownership of too, because they were involved in the selection process.
Thanks so much for sharing, Mindy. That makes perfect sense. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much. I very much enjoyed the conversation with you. I'm pretty sure viewers did too. If you like this webinar, stay in touch. We will share the recording of this session with you shortly, so stay tuned for that. And again, feel free to share it with anyone who might be interested or you think might be benefiting from listening. Scan the QR code to go to our gocomposable.com page, where we have a vast collection of resources. And if there's anything running through your head that you just cannot find an answer for, come find us personally and we'll be happy to help you out. And with that, again, thank you all for making time in your busy days to join us here. Have a great day or evening or night, wherever you are. And goodbye from Contentstack. Thank you so much.